Welcome to Marple Whispers. I'm Sean. Tell me, where are you listening from right now? And what time is it there? I'd love to know. Share it in the comments along with how you liked the story. I reply to every single one of you. Now let's step into the mystery, in the misty heart of Kyoto's ancient samurai garden, where cherry blossoms whisper secrets of betrayal. Elderly sleuth Miss Jane Marple arrives for a serene spring gathering, only to stumble upon a chilling murder. A wealthy antique dealer lies stabbed with his own poisoned samurai dagger, his body sprawled in a pavilion of raked sand, surrounded by suspects. A brooding sculptor with hidden debts, a jealous linguist forging artifacts, a diplomat's daughter entangled in lies, and a widow with motives as sharp as a katana. As alibis crumble and shadows deepen under stone lanterns, Miss Marple unravels a web of greed, blackmail, and forbidden affairs. But who wielded the blade? Dive into this Agatha Christie-inspired whodunit, where every petal hides a clue, and one shocking confession lifts the bamboo veil. Will justice bloom, or wilt in the wind? Stay tuned for twists that grip tighter than a samurai's grip. Chapter 1. The Cherry Blossom Invitation. The rhythmic hum of the Shinkansen bullet train lulled Miss Jane Marple into a state of quiet contemplation as it sliced through the Japanese countryside like a silver arrow. At 78, she had grown accustomed to the gentle pace of life in St. Mary Mead, where the most exotic journey might involve a bus to the neighbouring village. Yet here she was, halfway around the world, her small suitcase tucked neatly beside her, containing little more than a few woolen cardigans, her favourite knitting needles, and a well-thumbed guide to Japanese etiquette. The invitation had arrived unexpectedly, penned in the elegant script of her old school friend, Lady Evelyn Hargrove. Dearest Jane, it began, the cherry blossoms are in full splendour this spring, painting Kyoto in hues of pink and white that would charm even the sternest heart. Do come and stay at our villa. It's perched above the ancient samurai garden, a place of such serene beauty it beggars description. And between us, there's a small puzzle brewing among our guests that might amuse your incomparable mind. Miss Marple smiled faintly, adjusting her spectacles as rice paddies and distant mountains blurred past the window. Puzzles indeed. In her experience, they seldom stayed small. People were much the same everywhere, she reflected, driven by the same passions, harbouring the same secrets, whether in a quaint English hamlet or beneath the eaves of a pagoda. She had accepted the invitation with a mix of curiosity and caution, sensing in Evelyn's words an undercurrent of unease, like a ripple disturbing a still pond. The train glided to a halt at Kyoto station, and Miss Marple stepped onto the platform amid a bustle of kimono-clad travellers and salarymen in sharp suits. A chauffeur in a peaked cap awaited her, holding a sign with her name in precise Roman letters. The drive to the villa wound through narrow streets lined with temples and tea-houses, the air heavy with the scent of incense and blooming sakura. As they ascended a hill, the samurai garden came into view below. A masterpiece of Zen design, its gravel paths raked into swirling patterns that mimicked flowing water, dotted with moss-covered stones and ancient lanterns. The villa itself was a harmonious blend of Western grandeur and Eastern minimalism, ivy-cloaked walls framing shoji screens, with a veranda overlooking the garden's tranquil expanse. Lady Evelyn greeted her at the door with open arms, her once vibrant auburn hair now streaked with silver, but her laugh as infectious as ever. "Jane, you haven't changed a bit. Come in, come in. The others are dying to meet you." She led Miss Marple into a sunlit drawing room where an eclectic assembly awaited, teacups in hand. Lord Hargrove, Evelyn's husband and a British diplomat of long standing, rose first. A burly figure with a moustache that bristled like a hedgehog's spines, his voice booming with forced joviality. "Miss Marple, heard all about your sleuthing exploits from Evelyn. Welcome to our little outpost." Beside him sat their daughter, Amelia, a willowy young woman in her mid-20s, her fingers stained with paint and her eyes alight with artistic fervour. She was engaged to Takashi Yamamoto, who lounged nearby, a tall, brooding Japanese sculptor with chiselled features and hair tied back in a ponytail, his gaze often drifting to the garden as if it held some private torment. "Takashi's family has tended the samurai garden for generations," Evelyn explained in a stage whisper. "It's said to have been a retreat for warriors seeking enlightenment or plotting revenge, depending on the legend." Then there was Dr. Elias Thorne, an American archaeologist with a weathered face and a pipe clenched between his teeth, his khaki vest pockets bulging with notebooks. He was excavating nearby Heian-era ruins, he announced grandly, unearthing treasures that rewrite history. His assistant, Miss Clara Voss, a prim linguist in her 30s with wire-rimmed glasses and a no-nonsense bun, nodded curtly. "We're decoding inscriptions that could link ancient Japan to lost civilizations," she added, her tone sharp as a scalpel. Finally, Mr. Hiroshi Kato and his wife Yumi completed the circle. Kato was a prosperous antique dealer from Kyoto's bustling markets, his silk tie adorned with a jade pin, his smile polished but fleeting. He specialized in rare swords and artifacts, he said, gesturing with manicured hands. Yumi, elegant in a modern kimono patterned with cranes, remained mostly silent, her dark eyes watchful, sipping tea with the grace of a geisha. As the afternoon waned, the group ventured into the garden for a stroll beneath the cherry blossoms, petals drifting like confetti in the breeze. Misako Marple, leaning lightly on her cane, inhaled the floral perfume, her mind cataloguing the subtle dynamics at play. Amelia clung to Takashi's arm, whispering animatedly about her latest canvas, but he responded with distracted nods, his eyes flicking toward Kato. Dr. Thorne expounded on samurai lore to Lord Hargrove, while Clara Voss trailed behind, scribbling notes. Yumi walked alone, her steps measured as if treading on fragile ice. "Such a peaceful haven," Miss Marple remarked to Evelyn, pausing by a koi pond where golden fish glided beneath lily pads. "Yet I recall how even the quietest gardens can harbour thorns. Like old Mrs. Pritchard's rosebed back home. Beautiful blooms, but oh, the prickles beneath." Evelyn chuckled uneasily. "You're incorrigible, Jane. But truthfully, there's been a bit of tension. Hiroshi's been quarrelling with nearly everyone, over artifacts, debts, you name it. And Amelia, well, young love has its storms." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the raked sand. The party converged on the central pavilion, a wooden structure with upturned eaves, surrounded by meticulously patterned gravel that no foot had disturbed. Takashi pointed out a stone lantern etched with haiku, his voice low and intense. Kato laughed, a short, barking sound, and muttered something in Japanese that made Yumi's face tighten. Then, without warning, a piercing scream shattered the idyll. It came from Amelia, who had wandered ahead. The group rushed forward, hearts pounding. There, in the heart of the pavilion, lay Hiroshi Kato, face down on the cool tatami mat, his body unnaturally still. From his back protruded the hilt of an antique samurai dagger, its blade buried deep, a trickle of blood staining the wood. The air hung heavy with shock, the cherry blossoms swirling indifferently overhead. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed behind her spectacles. "Dear me," she murmured, as the others gasped and recoiled. "It seems the puzzle has revealed itself sooner than expected." Chapter 2. The Shadow of the Blade. The echo of Amelia's scream still hung in the air like a discordant note from a shamisen, freezing the group in a tableau of horror. Hiroshi Kato's body lay sprawled across the pavilion's tatami floor, the antique samurai dagger embedded between his shoulder blades, its ornate hilt catching the fading light of the setting sun. Blood pooled slowly, seeping into the woven straw, a stark crimson against the muted tones of the garden. Miss Jane Marple, ever the picture of composure, stepped forward cautiously, her cane tapping lightly on the wooden edge of the pavilion. "We must not touch anything," she said quietly, her voice steady amid the chaos. "The authorities will want the scene preserved." Lord Hargrove, his face flushed and moustache quivering, barked orders at no one in particular. "Someone fetch the police! Evelyn, stay back! This is no sight for ladies." But Lady Evelyn, pale yet resolute, had already dispatched the chauffeur with a hurried whisper. Takashi Yamamoto knelt briefly near the body, his sculptor's hands hovering as if to assess some flawed clay, before recoiling with a muttered oath in Japanese. Yumi Kato stood apart, her elegant features frozen in a mask of shock, one hand pressed to her lips, the other clutching the folds of her kimono as if to ward off an invisible chill. Dr. Elias Thorne, ever the man of action, checked for a pulse with professional detachment, his pipe forgotten in his pocket. "He's gone," he announced grimly, straightening up. "Stabbed clean through. Death must have been instantaneous." Clara Voss, hovering at his elbow, adjusted her glasses with trembling fingers. "Who could have done this? We were all together, weren't we?" Miss Marple's keen eyes darted about, noting the undisturbed raked sand surrounding the pavilion, the cherry petals scattered like confetti over the gravel paths. "Not quite all together, perhaps," she murmured to herself, recalling how the group had fragmented during their stroll. People, in her experience, were like threads in a tapestry, seemingly intertwined, yet easily pulled apart to reveal hidden patterns. She thought of that unfortunate business in St. Mary Mead with the vicar's nephew, where a garden party had masked a far darker deed. The wail of sirens soon pierced the twilight, and within minutes, Inspector Kenji Nakamura arrived with a team of efficient officers. He was a compact man in his 40s, with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes that missed nothing, his uniform as impeccable as the garden's design. Bowing slightly to the assembled guests, he introduced himself in flawless English. "I am Inspector Nakamura of the Kyoto Prefectural Police. This is a grave matter. Please remain where you are." His men cordoned off the area with yellow tape, the plastic fluttering ominously in the breeze, while photographers and forensics experts swarmed the pavilion like diligent bees. Nakamura approached the body first, crouching to examine the dagger without touching it. A katana tanto, antique by the look of the Tsuba-guard. Valuable? He glanced up at Yumi. "Madam Kato, was this your husband's?" Yumi nodded faintly, her voice a whisper. "Yes, from his collection. He kept it in our shop in Gion. It was stolen last week, or so he claimed to the insurance." Her eyes welled with tears, but Miss Marple noted how they remained unshed, glistening like dew on a leaf. "Hiroshi had many enemies in the trade. Rivals who envied his successes, collectors who felt cheated." "Cheated?" Nakamura's tone sharpened. "Elaborate, please," Dr. Thorne interjected, lighting his pipe with a match that flared brightly in the gathering dusk. "Cato was no saint in the antiquities world. He bragged about a hidden vault of Edo period relics, swords, armor, scrolls, worth a fortune. Perhaps a thief tailed him here, saw an opportunity. He puffed thoughtfully, the smoke curling upward. Robbery turned deadly. Happens more than you'd think in my line of work. Dig sites are rife with opportunists. Clara Voss, standing close to Thorn, nodded vigorously, her bun coming slightly undone. I overheard him arguing with Takashi just this afternoon, by the bamboo grove. Something about a forged sculpture. Kato accused him of peddling fakes under the Yamamoto name. Takashi's face darkened, his fists clenching at his sides. Lies! It was a misunderstanding. My family's honor is not for sale. Amelia slipped her hand into his, her paint-stained fingers squeezing reassuringly, but her own expression betrayed anxiety. Miss Marple, seated now on a stone bench at the garden's edge, had retrieved her knitting from her bag. A soft pink scarf in progress. Her needles clicked rhythmically, a soothing counterpoint to the tension. Arguments are like weeds in a well-tended plot, she observed mildly to Lady Evelyn, who had joined her. They spring up from deeper roots, often nourished by old grievances. Evelyn leaned in, her voice low. Jane, you're spot on. Amelia confided in me earlier. Kato refused her a loan for a new art studio in Tokyo. Said her work was derivative. She was furious, stormed off to sketch by the pond alone. And Takashi, he's so protective of her. Nakamura, overhearing snippets, began preliminary questioning, his notebook flipping open like a fan. Alibis, if you please. Where were each of you in the minutes before the scream? Lord Hargrove cleared his throat. In my study, reviewing dispatches from the embassy. Door was closed. Evelyn can vouch. She passed by. Evelyn confirmed with a nod. I was in the kitchen, instructing the cook on dinner, saw no one. Amelia spoke up hesitantly. I was by the koi pond, drawing the blossoms. Takashi joined me briefly, then went to his workshop. Takashi affirmed this. Sharpening tools, stone chisels. The garden paths loop back. I heard nothing unusual. Dr. Thorne shrugged. Wandering the outer paths, pondering a new excavation theory. Clara was with me part way. Then she veered off to note some inscriptions on a lantern. Clara flushed. Yes, linguistic curiosities. I was alone for perhaps 10 minutes. Yumi, last to speak, folded her hands demurely. I lingered by the entrance torii gate, admiring the view. Hiroshi said he wanted a moment in the pavilion, to meditate, he claimed. Nakamura jotted notes swiftly, his gaze sweeping the group. Convenient separations. The paths are indeed labyrinthine, but not impenetrable. He signaled a forensic technician who carefully bagged Kato's personal effects, a wallet, keys, and a small jade Netsuke carving. We'll check for fingerprints, fibers. The dagger's poison residue, if any, will be tested. Miss Marple's needles paused. Poison? She hadn't considered that yet, but it fit. In her village escapades, blades were straightforward, but additives spoke of premeditation, like that arsenic-laced tea at the Women's Institute meeting. Inspector, she ventured politely, might the blade have been tampered with? A subtle toxin to ensure the deed. Nakamura regarded her with interest. An astute observation, Miss Marple. Our lab will confirm. Now, the villa is off-limits to the garden until dawn. Return inside. Interviews continue tomorrow. As the group filed back, Miss Marple lingered, her eyes tracing the single set of footprints in the sand, leading from the body toward the shadows of the bamboo. Leading away, she whispered to herself. But from where did the killer come? And why this blade, so personal? A chill wind stirred the petals, and she pulled her cardigan closer. The shadow of the blade stretched long, hinting at secrets yet to unfold. Inside the villa, the atmosphere crackled with unspoken accusations. Over hastily prepared tea in the drawing room, whispers circulated. Thorne muttered to Clara about Kyoto's shady deals, while she shot furtive glances at Yumi. Amelia clung to Takashi, her engagement ring glinting like a promise under threat. Lord Hargrove paced, decrying the disruption to diplomatic harmony. Miss Marple sipped her tea, observing it all. Yumi's composure intrigued her most, too perfect, like a porcelain doll. And those footprints, deliberate misdirection. She recalled a poacher in St. Mary Mead who laid false trails to evade the gamekeeper. Human nature, she thought, transcends borders. Greed, jealousy, revenge, they bloom in every soil. That night, as rain pattered against the shoji screens, Miss Marple lay awake, her mind weaving clues. A soft creak in the hallway. Someone stirring? She listened intently, but it faded. Tomorrow would bring revelation, she was certain. For now, the samurai garden held its breath, its ancient stones guarding the truth beneath the moonlit blossoms. Chapter 3. Whispers Among the Willows. The morning sun filtered through the bamboo grove, casting dappled shadows across the samurai garden, where the air still held the weight of last night's tragedy. Miss Jane Marple, her floral shawl draped over her shoulders, stepped carefully along the gravel path, her cane tapping a gentle rhythm. The police tape fluttered like an errant ribbon, guarding the pavilion where Hiroshi Kato had met his end. The raked sand around it was pristine, save for the single trail of footprints leading to the bamboo thicket. A detail that nagged at her like a dropped stitch in her knitting. Footprints can lie as boldly as words, she murmured, thinking of a St. Mary Mead gardener who once staged a theft to mask his own pilfering. She paused by a willow tree, its drooping branches swaying like whispered confidences. The garden's serenity was deceptive, a polished veneer over turbulent undercurrents. Miss Marple's sharp eyes noted a crushed petal here, a disturbed pebble there, small signs of hurried passage. Someone was careless, she thought, or perhaps meant to be seen. Inside the villa, the guests gathered for breakfast in a dining room adorned with lacquered screens and a low table set with porcelain teacups. The mood was brittle, like the thin ice of a village pond in early winter. Lady Evelyn, ever the gracious hostess, poured green tea with a trembling hand, her eyes darting to her daughter, Amelia, who sat pale and silent beside Takashi Yamamoto. The sculptor's jaw was set, his gaze fixed on the garden beyond the window. Dr. Elias Thorne chewed toast with unnecessary vigour, while Clara Voss scribbled in a notebook, her pen scratching like a restless insect. Yumi Kato, in a black kimono that seemed to absorb the light, sipped her tea with mechanical grace, her face an unreadable mask. Inspector Kenji Nakamura joined them, his presence commanding quiet respect. He carried a slim folder, its contents hinted at by the furrow in his brow. Preliminary findings, he announced, his voice clipped yet courteous. The dagger was indeed from Mr. Kato's collection, reported stolen 10 days ago. Curiously, it bore traces of belladonna, a poison that slows the heart before the blade's work is done. This was no impulsive act. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Lord Hargrove spluttered into his teacup. Poison! Good Lord, that's diabolical. Who'd have access to such a thing? Nakamura's gaze swept the table. Belladonna is not uncommon in herbal studies or gardens. This villa's greenhouse, tended by you, Lord Hargrove, contains such plants. Hargrove's moustache bristled. Preposterous. I grow orchids, not poisons. Anyone could wander in there. Doors are never locked. Miss Marple's knitting needles, resting in her lap, clicked once as she tilted her head. A greenhouse is like a village chemist's shop, she said softly to Evelyn. Open to all, but only the knowledgeable select the dangerous items. She recalled a case in St. Mary Mead where a chemist's assistant had misused belladonna for a jealous scheme. Yumi spoke, her voice a low thread of silk. Hiroshi's will was clear. I inherit his estate, shop, artifacts, all. But there's a codicil. If murder is proven, the fortune goes to a cultural trust. He feared betrayal. Always. Her eyes flicked to Takashi, then away. He dealt in shadows, Inspector. Rivals, debts, secrets. Dr. Thorne snorted, setting down his pipe. Shadows? Kyoto swindled me on a jade statuette last year. Claimed it was Heian, but it was a modern fake. If anyone had a grudge, it was me, but I'm no murderer. His tone was defiant, but his fingers drummed the table. Clara Voss, pushing up her glasses, leaned forward. I heard Kyoto threaten to expose Dr. Thorne's excavations. Said some artifacts were looted, not illegally dug. They argued fiercely 2 nights ago. Thorne shot her a look that could have cracked stone. Amelia's voice, tremulous, broke the tension. Hiroshi knew something about me too. I sold a painting last year, claimed it was mine, but it was a copy of a Hokusai print. I needed money for my studio. He threatened to tell everyone, ruin my career. Her eyes brimmed with tears, and Takashi's arm encircled her protectively. Blackmail is a dangerous game, Miss Marple observed, her tone mild, but her mind racing. She thought of a St. Mary Mead widow who'd used secrets to extort neighbours, only to meet a grim end. It invites retribution, like pulling a thread that unravels the whole cloth. Nakamura produced a photograph of the footprints, enlarged to show their distinct tread. These match sandals issued to all villa guests. Standard issue, size 8, common but telling. Mr. Yamamoto, your workshop is near the bamboo grove. Did you pass this way? Takashi's eyes narrowed. I told you, I was sharpening tools. I didn't enter the pavilion. Those prints aren't mine. His voice held a quiet fury, but Miss Marple noted the slight tremor in his hands. The inspector turned to Yumi. Mrs. Kato, your husband's ledger, found in his room, lists transactions with Mr. Yamamoto. Debts, substantial ones, tied to art auctions. Care to explain? Yumi's composure faltered, her fingers tightening on her cup. Hiroshi lent money to many, including Takashi, but he never spoke of debts to me. Perhaps forged entries. Takashi stood abruptly, his chair scraping. That's a lie. I owed him nothing. He tried to trap me, sully my family's name. Amelia pulled him back, whispering urgently. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm. A ledger is like a village gossip's tongue, she said to Evelyn. It tells tales, but not always true ones. She recalled a shopkeeper's falsified books that had sparked a scandal back home. Nakamura shifted focus. Miss Voss, you were studying inscriptions near the pavilion. Did you see anyone approach Mr. Kyoto? Clara hesitated, her pen stilling. No, I was engrossed. The lanterns have Heian-era kanji. Fascinating, really. I didn't notice anything. Her voice was too quick, Miss Marple thought, like a schoolgirl caught fibbing. As the group dispersed, Miss Marple lingered in the garden, escorted by a young officer. She examined the willow's base, where a scrap of fabric, silk, blue, torn, caught on a root. Curious, she mused, tucking it into her handkerchief. Not from a kimono, perhaps a scarf? She envisioned Clara's blue shawl from yesterday's stroll. Back in the villa, Evelyn confided over tea. "Jane, this is dreadful. Amelia's so fragile. She adored Hiroshi once, saw him as a mentor. And Takashi's temper, I worry." Miss Marple patted her hand. "Worry is natural, but observation is better. People reveal themselves in small ways, like a villager's glance at a rival's gate." She thought of Clara's nervous scribbling, Yumi's controlled grief, Thorne's bluster. Each held a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. As noon approached, Nakamura announced a search of the guest rooms. In Takashi's workshop, hidden behind chisels, they found a vial of belladonna extract, unlabeled but damning. Takashi paled. "That's not mine! Someone planted it!" Amelia gasped, clinging to him. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. Planted, indeed, she thought, like a rose in a rival's garden to stir envy. The evidence was too convenient, much like a staged theft in St. Mary Mead that had unravelled under scrutiny. The villa buzzed with suspicion as lunch was served, chopsticks clattering against porcelain. Dr. Thorne whispered to Clara. Yumi avoided Takashi's glare, and Amelia sketched nervously in a corner. Miss Marple, nibbling a rice ball, watched it all, her mind weaving threads, footprints, poison, fabric, into a pattern only half formed. The willows whispered secrets, but the truth lay just beyond her grasp, waiting for the right tug to unravel it. Chapter 4. The Lantern's Deceptive Glow. The afternoon sun bathed the samurai garden in a golden haze, softening the edges of the tragedy that clung to its raked sands like morning dew. Miss Jane Marple, her shawl tucked neatly around her shoulders, sat on the villa's veranda, her knitting needles idle for once as she gazed at the stone lanterns dotting the paths below. Their weathered surfaces, etched with centuries-old kanji, seemed to guard secrets as steadfastly as the villagers of St. Mary Mead guarded their gossip. Light reveals, she mused to herself, but shadows conceal far more. The single set of footprints leading from Hiroshi Kato's body to the bamboo grove nagged at her, a thread in the tapestry that refused to align. Inside the villa the air was thick with unease, as Inspector Kenji Nakamura orchestrated a meticulous search of the premises. His officers moved with the precision of a tea ceremony, combing guest rooms and garden sheds for clues to unravel the murder. The guests summoned to the drawing room sat in a tense semicircle, their faces a gallery of apprehension. Lady Evelyn poured tea with a forced smile, her hands betraying a slight tremor. Lord Hargrove muttered about diplomatic embarrassments, his moustache twitching like an agitated caterpillar. Amelia clutched a sketchbook, her pencil hovering aimlessly, while Takashi Yamamoto sat rigid, his sculptor's hands clenched as if moulding invisible clay. Dr. Elias Thorne puffed on his pipe, the smoke curling like a question mark, and Clara Voss adjusted her glasses, her notebook abandoned on her lap. Yumi Kato, serene in her black kimono, seemed a statue of grief, yet her eyes darted with a vigilance Miss Marple found curiously unyielding. Nakamura entered, holding a lacquered box retrieved from Kato's room. "This was hidden beneath a floorboard," he announced, his voice as crisp as the autumn air. He opened it to reveal a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with meticulous entries in Kato's spidery hand. It details transactions, some legitimate, others less so, black market artifacts, loans, debts. He fixed his gaze on Takashi. "Your name appears frequently, Mr. Yamamoto. Gambling debts from art auctions, totaling millions of yen." Takashi's eyes flashed. "That's nonsense! I never borrowed from him. Those entries are fabricated. Someone's framing me." Amelia gasped, her sketchbook slipping to the floor. Miss Marple noted the tremor in Takashi's voice, not unlike a St. Mary Mead youth caught lying about a stolen bicycle. Yumi's voice, soft yet cutting, broke the silence. Hiroshi was meticulous. He wouldn't falsify records. Perhaps, Takashi, you hid your debts to protect your family's honor. Her tone was accusatory, yet Miss Marple detected a rehearsed quality, like a village actress delivering lines too smoothly. Nakamura turned to the dagger, now bagged as evidence but displayed in a photograph. The blade bears the Yamamoto crest, he said, holding up the image. A family heirloom, Mr. Yamamoto? Takashi nodded reluctantly. It was a gift from my ancestors to Kyoto's, centuries ago, to seal a pact. Hiroshi must have brought it from his shop. Yumi shook her head. Impossible. He told me it remained in Kyoto, locked in a safe after the theft report. Her words hung heavy, and Takashi's face tightened, as if sculpted in stone. Miss Marple, borrowing Clara's magnifying glass, examined the photograph closely. The crest is worn but distinct, she remarked, yet the blade's polish suggests recent care. Curious for a stolen item. She recalled a St. Mary Mead burglary where a stolen brooch turned up polished and planted to mislead. Dr. Thorne, eager to deflect scrutiny, spoke up. Look, Kato and I had our differences. A bad deal over a relic cost me a fortune. We argued in the garden 2 days ago, sure, but I was in the library when he died. Lady Evelyn saw me there, nose in a book. Evelyn nodded. Yes, he was reading about Heian ceramics, quite engrossed. Her voice wavered, as if unsure of her own testimony. Clara fidgeted, her glasses slipping. I was copying lantern inscriptions, alone, as I said. But I did see Kato pacing near the pavilion earlier. He seemed agitated. Nakamura's eyes narrowed. Agitated? About what? Clara hesitated, then blurted, He muttered about betrayal. Said someone close was undermining him. I thought he meant Yumi, maybe an affair or something. Yumi's face remained impassive, but her fingers tightened on her sleeve. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Betrayal is a sharp spur, she said to Evelyn in a low voice. It drives people to desperate acts, like that affair in St. Mary Mead that ended with a poisoned scone. She noted Clara's quick glance at Thorne. A flicker of something, jealousy perhaps. As the search continued, an officer emerged from the greenhouse, holding a small vial labelled only with a chemical symbol. Belladonna extract, Nakamura confirmed. Found near the orchids. Lord Hargrove, you oversee the greenhouse. Any explanation? Hargrove blustered. Outrageous! I tend flowers, not poisons. That vial's not mine. Anyone could have slipped in there. His indignation rang hollow, and Miss Marple recalled a village squire who swore innocence while hiding contraband in his shed. The group was dismissed to their rooms, but Miss Marple lingered on the veranda, watching the lanterns flicker as dusk crept in. Their glow cast elongated shadows, like fingers pointing to hidden truths. She thought of the ledger, the vial, the footprints, all too neatly aligned, like a village fete rigged to favor one contestant. Someone is orchestrating this, she mused, her mind weaving patterns. A rustle in the bushes startled her. Clara Voss emerged, her blue shawl catching on a branch. Oh, Miss Marple, I was just checking the lanterns again. The inscriptions are so intricate. Her voice was breathless, her glasses fogged with nervous perspiration. Indeed, Miss Marple replied, her tone gentle but probing. Lanterns hold stories, don't they? Like village gossip, they illuminate only what someone wishes seen. Clara flushed, hurrying back to the villa. Alone, Miss Marple examined the bush where Clara had stood. A tiny scrap of blue silk, matching the earlier fragment, lay caught in the thorns. "Careless," she whispered, tucking it away. She recalled a St. Mary Mead seamstress whose dropped thread unravelled a theft. Clara's presence in the garden, so near the crime scene, was no coincidence. Inside, dinner was a strained affair, chopsticks clinking against porcelain in near silence. Amelia whispered to Takashi, her eyes red from crying. Thorne and Clara exchanged furtive glances, while Yumi stared into her miso soup as if it held answers. Lord Hargrove grumbled about the police disrupting his schedule, but Evelyn shushed him with a look. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind turning over the clues. The ledger implicated Takashi, yet its entries seemed too precise, like a forged signature. The belladonna in the greenhouse pointed to Hargrove, but its placement felt staged. And Clara, her nervous demeanour and convenient absences, suggested more than scholarly zeal. People are like lanterns, Miss Marple thought. They shine brightly to distract from what lies in their shadows. As the evening deepened, a soft rain began to fall, pattering against the shoji screens. Miss Marple retired to her room, but sleep eluded her. She sat by the window, watching the garden's lanterns flicker through the mist. A creak in the corridor. Someone moving stealthily? She held her breath, but the sound faded. The deceptive glow of the lanterns lingered in her mind, promising truths yet to be unveiled. Chapter 5. Threads of the Kimono. The rain had ceased by mid-morning, leaving the samurai garden glistening as if dusted with diamonds. Miss Jane Marple stood at the edge of the villa's veranda, her sensible shoes damp from a brief foray along the gravel paths. The air carried the clean scent of wet moss and cherry blossoms, but the serenity was a facade, like a polished village facade hidden petty feuds. Her keen eyes lingered on the pavilion, where Hiroshi Kato's life had been snuffed out, the yellow police tape now sagging like a weary sentinel. The single trail of footprints, the belladonna-laced dagger, the scrap of blue silk, all were threads in a delicate kimono of deceit, and Miss Marple was determined to trace their weave. Inside, Inspector Kenji Nakamura had summoned the guests to the drawing room for formal interviews, his demeanour as precise as the garden's raked patterns. The group sat in a tense tableau, Lady Evelyn twisting a handkerchief, Lord Hargrove glowering, Amelia sketching nervously, Takashi Yamamoto staring at the floor, Dr. Elias Thorne puffing his pipe, Clara Voss clutching her notebook, and Yumi Kato, serene yet distant in her morning black. Miss Marple, unobtrusive in her corner, resumed her knitting, the pink scarf growing steadily as her ears caught every nuance. Nakamura began with Amelia, his notebook open like a fan. "Miss Hargrove, your sketchbook. Yesterday I noticed a page torn out. Care to explain?" Amelia's pencil froze, her cheeks paling. "It was just a rough sketch, nothing important. I tore it out to give to Takashi, a note about our wedding plans." Her voice faltered, and Takashi's hand brushed hers, a silent reassurance. Miss Marple's needles paused. "Notes can be such telling things," she murmured to Evelyn, "like the billets do in St. Mary Mead that revealed a scandal when found in the wrong hands." She recalled a torn letter that had unmasked a blackmailer. Nakamura's gaze shifted to Yumi. "Mrs. Kato, we found letters in your room, correspondence suggesting an affair with Dr. Thorne. Did your husband know?" Yumi's composure wavered, her fingers tightening on her kimono sleeve. "Those letters are old, from before our marriage. Hiroshi knew and forgave me. They mean nothing now." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Thorn, his pipe smoke curling, scoffed. "Nonsense! Those are fabrications. I never wrote to her. Someone's stirring trouble, probably to deflect from their own guilt." His bluster rang hollow, and Clara Voss's lips tightened, her glasses slipping as she scribbled furiously. Jealousy, perhaps. Nakamura pressed, glancing at Clara. "Miss Voss, you suggested Mrs. Kato's infidelity. Did you see or hear something specific?" Clara flushed, her pen trembling. "I overheard them talking late one night near the greenhouse. Intimate tones, laughter. I assumed." She trailed off, her gaze darting to Thorn, who shook his head vehemently. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "Assumptions are like loose threads," she said softly to Evelyn. "Tug too hard, and the whole garment unravels." She thought of a St. Mary Mead love triangle, where whispered rumours led to a poisoned chalice. Nakamura turned to Takashi. "The vial of belladonna in your workshop. Your fingerprints were on it. Explain." Takashi's jaw clenched. "I've never seen it before. I handle tools, not poisons. Someone placed it there to frame me. Probably the same person who faked my debts in Kato's ledger." His voice rose, and Amelia squeezed his arm, her eyes pleading. The inspector produced the photograph of the dagger again. "The Yamamoto crest ties this to your family, yet Mrs. Kato insists it was kept in Kyoto. Did you retrieve it, perhaps, to settle a score?" Takashi stood, fists balled. "I told you I didn't touch it. My family's honor doesn't rest on murder." His passion was convincing, but Miss Marple noted the sweat beading on his brow, like a village lad caught in a lie. Lord Hargrove, unable to stay silent, boomed, "This is absurd! You're hounding the boy when anyone could have slipped into that greenhouse. I've said it before, those plants aren't my doing." His indignation was theatrical, and Miss Marple recalled a St. Mary Mead squire whose loud protests hid a pilfered church fund. Nakamura closed his notebook with a snap. "We'll test the vial for other prints. For now, remain here. No one leaves the villa." As the group dispersed, Miss Marple lingered, her mind sifting clues. The torn sketch page, the letters, the vial, all pointed in different directions, yet converged on motive. Greed, revenge, love. She thought of a village seamstress who'd used a forged note to ruin a rival, only to be caught by a stray thread. She slipped out to the garden, escorted by a young officer, and revisited the willow where she'd found the blue silk scrap. Nearby, a stone lantern bore fresh scratches, as if someone had climbed it for a better view, or to avoid the sand's telltale surface. Clever, she mused, but not clever enough. She tucked a pebble from the base into her pocket, its edge faintly stained with green paint. Amelia's, perhaps. Back inside, Evelyn confided over tea. "Jane, I'm at my wit's end. Amelia's distraught. She thinks Takashi's being framed, but she's hiding something. And Clara's been so jumpy, always scribbling or sneaking off." Miss Marple nodded, sipping her tea. "People hide what they fear to reveal, like a village gossip burying a secret in chatter. We must watch for the unguarded moment." She recalled Clara's nervous exit from the bushes, the silk matching her shawl. As evening approached, Nakamura called for a reconstruction of the murder's timeline. The group gathered in the garden, lanterns casting a warm glow that belied the chill of suspicion. Each retraced their steps from the fatal hour. Amelia stood by the koi pond, sketching. Takashi in his workshop, chisels clinking. Thorn and Clara on the outer paths. Yumi at the Torii gate. Hargrove in his study. But the pavilion's rear entrance, hidden by a screen of bamboo, drew Miss Marple's attention. "The footprints lead away," she said to Nakamura, "but the killer entered from behind, unseen, silent." Nakamura nodded, his eyes sharp. A concealed approach, but who knew the garden's layout so well? Miss Marple's gaze settled on Clara, who fidgeted under the lantern's light. "Miss Voss, you studied the garden's inscriptions. Did you map its paths, perhaps?" Clara stammered, "Only for research. The Heian kanji are my focus, not the paths." Her denial was too quick, and Miss Marple noted a smudge of green paint on her sleeve, fresh, like Amelia's palette. Dinner was a sombre affair, the clink of chopsticks punctuated by strained silence. Thorne whispered to Clara, who avoided his gaze. Yumi stared into her sack, while Amelia and Takashi held hands tightly, their engagement ring glinting defiantly. Hargrove muttered about embassy protocols, but Evelyn's eyes sought Miss Marple's, pleading for clarity. As night fell, Miss Marple sat by her window, the garden's lanterns flickering like distant stars. The threads were aligning. Clara's shawl, the paint, the hidden path. Someone wove this carefully, she thought, but every kimono has a seam that can be unpicked. A soft creak in the corridor, another restless soul. She listened, her mind threading clues, certain the next day would pull the fabric apart. Chapter 6. The Bamboo Veil Lifts. The samurai garden lay cloaked in the soft glow of dawn, its gravel paths shimmering with dew like scattered pearls. Miss Jane Marple, wrapped in her trusty shawl, stood near the pavilion where Hiroshi Kato had met his end, her cane resting lightly on the ground. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint sweetness of cherry blossoms, but the tranquility masked a tangle of motives as intricate as the garden's raked patterns. The single trail of footprints, the belladonna-tainted dagger, the scrap of blue silk, the green paint smudge. All were pieces of a puzzle that Miss Marple felt was nearing completion. Like a village quilt, she thought, each patch tells a story, but only when stitched together does the pattern emerge. Inside the villa, the atmosphere crackled with tension as the guests gathered for breakfast. Inspector Kenji Nakamura, his uniform as immaculate as ever, stood at the head of the dining room, his eyes scanning the group like a hawk over a field. Lady Evelyn's hands trembled as she arranged pastries, while Lord Hargrove's bluster had softened to a nervous mutter. Amelia sat close to Takashi Yamamoto, her sketchbook abandoned, her eyes red-rimmed. Takashi's sculptor's hands were steady, but his gaze was wary, like a man awaiting a verdict. Dr. Elias Thorne lit his pipe with forced nonchalance, while Clara Voss clutched her notebook, her glasses fogging with anxiety. Yumi Kato, in her morning black, sipped tea with a composure that seemed to Miss Marple almost too perfect, like a St. Mary Mead widow who'd rehearsed her grief. Nakamura cleared his throat, holding up a small evidence bag containing the blue silk scrap Miss Marple had found. "This was recovered near the willow," he said, his voice cutting through the room's unease. "It matches a shawl worn by Miss Voss. Care to explain?" Clara's pen clattered to the table. I lost that shawl during the garden stroll. It must have caught on a branch. I wasn't near the pavilion when Hiroshi died." Her voice was shrill, and Miss Marple noted the flush creeping up her neck, reminiscent of a village girl caught pilfering apples. Thorne interjected, his pipe smoke curling. "She's right. Clara was with me, studying lanterns. This is a distraction. Look at Takashi's debts, his family's dagger." His deflection was swift, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. Takashi stood, his voice low but fierce. "I've said it before. Those debts are lies, and I didn't touch that dagger. Someone's weaving a net around me." Amelia's hand tightened on his, her engagement ring glinting like a beacon of loyalty. Nakamura turned to Yumi. "Mrs. Kato, your husband's ledger also lists payments to Miss Voss, unmarked but substantial. Were you aware?" Yumi's eyes widened briefly, then narrowed. Hiroshi never mentioned her. He dealt with many, but payments? No. Her tone was measured, but Miss Marple caught a subtle shift, like a villager hiding a grudge behind polite smiles. The inspector produced another find, a torn scrap of paper from Amelia's sketchbook found in the greenhouse. "This appears to be a map of the garden's paths, Miss Hargrove, not a wedding note, as you claimed." Amelia gasped, her hands flying to her face. "I didn't draw that. Someone must have taken my book. It's always lying about." Her panic was genuine, but Miss Marple recalled a St. Mary Mead artist whose stolen sketches masked a deeper deception. "Maps guide the way," Miss Marple said softly to Evelyn, who hovered nearby. "But they can also lead astray, like that false trail in the vicarage burglary." Her knitting needles clicked, the pink scarf a quiet counterpoint to the rising tension. Nakamura announced a secondary construction, to be held at dusk under the garden's lanterns. The group reassembled in the fading light, their footsteps crunching on gravel as they retraced their movements from the night of the murder. The lanterns cast flickering shadows, turning the garden into a stage of doubt and deceit. Amelia stood by the koi pond, clutching a pencil. Takashi lingered near his workshop. Thorn and Clara traced the outer paths. Yumi paused at the Torii gate. Hargrove claimed his study. Miss Marple, escorted by a young officer, watched from the veranda, her eyes fixed on the pavilion's rear, where bamboo screened a hidden approach. "The footprints lead away," she murmured to Nakamura, pointing to the sand. "But the killer came from behind, through the bamboo, unseen. The sand was their canvas, painted to mislead." She thought of a St. Mary Mead poacher who'd left false tracks to evade capture. Nakamura nodded, his gaze sharp. A clever ruse, but who knew the garden's secrets so well? Miss Marple's eyes settled on Clara, who stood nervously by a lantern, her shawl conspicuously absent. "Miss Voss," she called gently, "your inscriptions, did they include the pavilion's hidden path?" Clara froze, her glasses reflecting the lantern's glow. I studied the lanterns, not paths. The kanji are my work, not murder." Her denial was frantic, and Miss Marple noted a smudge of green paint on her cuff, matching the pebble she'd found. The inspector pressed forward, his voice calm but relentless. "Miss Voss, the ledger's payments suggest you worked with Kato. Perhaps in his shadier dealings, forged artifacts maybe." Clara's composure shattered. "No, I catalogued his collection, that's all. He paid me for translations." Her voice broke, and Thorne's face darkened, as if sensing betrayal. Miss Marple stepped forward, her tone mild but piercing. "Cataloguing or conspiring? You knew the garden's paths, Miss Voss. You wore that blue shawl, and you borrowed Amelia's sketchbook to map your route, the belladonna. Your linguistic studies included herbal texts, didn't they? Like that St. Mary Mead chemist who knew poisons too well." The group gasped, and Clara's eyes widened in panic. "You're wrong. I didn't—" She stopped, her hands shaking as Nakamura produced the ledger, its final page listing a payment to CV for special services. "You were Kato's partner in forgeries," Miss Marple continued, her voice soft but unyielding. "He threatened to expose you, ruin your career. So you stole the dagger, laced it with belladonna from the greenhouse, and struck when he met you in the pavilion, thinking it a business talk. The footprints? A clever misstep to point elsewhere. Clara collapsed into a chair, sobbing. He was going to tell everyone. My reputation gone. I only meant to scare him, but he lunged, and I... Her confession spilled like water from a cracked vase, and Nakamura signalled an officer to cuff her. As Clara was led away, the garden seemed to exhale, its lanterns dimming in the night. Miss Marple adjusted her shawl, her mind already untangling the final threads. Human nature, she thought, is the same in Kyoto as in St. Mary Mead. Greed and fear weave the tightest knots. The group stood in stunned silence, the bamboo rustling, as if whispering its approval. Nakamura bowed slightly to Miss Marple. "Your insight is remarkable, madam. The case is closed." As they returned to the villa, Miss Marple glanced back at the garden, its beauty unmarred by the truth unveiled. "The bamboo veil lifts," she murmured, "but the heart's shadows linger." The lanterns flickered on, guardians of secrets now laid bare. Chapter 7. Blossoms in the Wind. The samurai garden basked in the gentle light of late morning, its cherry blossoms drifting like soft apologies across the raked gravel. The pavilion, once a stage for murder, stood silent, the yellow police tape removed, leaving only the memory of Hiroshi Kato's final moments. Miss Jane Marple sat on a stone bench near a koi pond, her knitting folded neatly in her lap, her eyes tracing the ripples where golden fish darted beneath lily pads. The air was warm, scented with spring's promise, but the garden's serenity felt fragile, like a St. Mary Mead tea party after a scandal had been laid bare. Clara Voss's confession had unravelled the mystery, yet Miss Marple sensed loose threads still fluttering, waiting to be tied off. Inside the villa, the atmosphere had softened, though an undercurrent of relief mingled with lingering unease. Lady Evelyn, her auburn hair catching the sunlight through a shoji screen, arranged a tray of senbei crackers with newfound calm. Lord Hargrove, his moustache less bristly, sipped coffee and spoke of returning to diplomatic duties. Amelia and Takashi Yamamoto sat close, their hands entwined, the weight of suspicion lifted from Takashi's shoulders. Dr. Elias Thorne, his pipe unlit for once, leafed through an archaeology journal, while Yumi Kato, still in morning black, gazed out at the garden, her expression unreadable, yet less guarded. Inspector Kenji Nakamura had departed, leaving behind a quiet gratitude for Miss Marple's clarity in piercing the bamboo veil. Evelyn approached, offering tea. "Jane, you've worked a miracle," she said, her voice warm but tinged with awe. "Clara, such a shock, to think she hid such venom behind those glasses." Miss Marple smiled faintly, accepting the cup. "People are like cherry blossoms, my dear, lovely on the surface, but fragile, easily scattered by hidden winds." She thought of a St. Mary Mead librarian whose meek demeanour masked a vengeful heart, undone by a misplaced letter. Clara's ambition was her undoing, much like Cato's greed. The morning's peace was broken by a soft knock. Nakamura returned, his uniform crisp, carrying a slim folder. "A final report," he announced, bowing slightly to Miss Marple. "Miss Voss's confession is corroborated. Fingerprints on the belladonna vial match hers, and the torn sketch page, a map of the pavilion's hidden path, was in her handwriting, not Miss Hargrove's." She admitted to borrowing the sketchbook to plan her approach. Amelia, overhearing, shuddered. "I can't believe I didn't notice it missing. I was so caught up with everything." Takashi squeezed her hand, his sculptor's fingers gentle but firm. "It's over now," he said, his voice steady. "We can move forward." Nakamura nodded. The dagger's poison was indeed belladonna, applied hours before the strike. Clara had access to the greenhouse and knowledge from her herbal studies. She forged ledger entries to implicate Mr. Yamamoto, hoping to shift blame. He glanced at Yumi. "Mrs. Kato, your husband's estate is secure, as the codicil won't apply. You inherit cleanly." Yumi inclined her head, her eyes glistening but dry. "Hiroshi's shadows are gone. I will honor his memory with truth." Her words were poised, yet Miss Marple detected a hint of relief, like a village widow freed from a burdensome marriage. Thorne, closing his journal, spoke up. "I owe you an apology, Miss Marple. I was quick to point fingers, thought it'd keep the heat off me. Cato's swindle stung, but I had no part in this." His candour was gruff, and Miss Marple recalled a St. Mary Mead merchant who confessed to lesser sins to avoid greater scrutiny. "No harm done," she replied, her tone mild. "Suspicion is a reflex like villagers whispering at a stranger's arrival. It's clarity that matters in the end." As the group dispersed, Miss Marple wandered the garden alone, her cane tapping a thoughtful rhythm. She paused by the willow where she'd found the blue silk, now certain it was Clara's, torn in her haste to flee the murder scene. The scratched lantern nearby told of her vantage point, perhaps to watch Cato's movements. Ambition and fear, Miss Marple mused, a dangerous blend, like that St. Mary Mead chemist who poisoned a rival over a promotion. Evelyn joined her, gesturing to the blossoms. "They're at their peak, Jane. Amelia and Takashi plan their wedding here next spring, under these very trees. A fresh start." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes twinkling. New beginnings are like spring gardens, full of hope, but needing care to thrive. Young love, like Amelia's, weathers storms if the roots are strong. She thought of a village romance that survived a theft accusation, sealed by trust. Back in the villa, lunch was a lighter affair, the clink of chopsticks mingling with tentative laughter. Amelia showed Miss Marple a sketch of the garden, its lines vibrant with promise. "I'll paint it for the wedding," she said, her smile shy but genuine. Takashi beside her spoke of sculpting a stone lantern as their gift to the garden's legacy. Yumi approached, her kimono rustling softly. "Miss Marple, I misjudged you, a quiet English lady, yet sharper than any katana. Hiroshi would have admired your mind." Her gratitude was sincere, and Miss Marple inclined her head, recalling a St. Mary Mead widow who found peace after a truth was revealed. Lord Hargrove raised a glass of sake. "To Miss Marple, our samurai of deduction. You've saved us from a diplomatic nightmare." The group chuckled, the tension melting like snow in spring. As evening fell, Miss Marple packed her Hulk's suitcase, her pink scarf nearly complete. Evelyn accompanied her to the veranda, where the lanterns glowed like fireflies. "Jane, will you return for the wedding?" she asked. "Perhaps," Miss Marple replied, her smile enigmatic. "Gardens and villages have much in common. Both bloom with secrets, but also with hope." She gazed at the cherry blossoms, drifting in the wind. "Life's mysteries endure, Evelyn, but solving one leaves room for new growth." The chauffeur arrived, and as Miss Marple boarded the car for Kyoto Station, she glanced back at the garden. The lanterns flickered, their light steady against the gathering dusk. Blossoms fall, she thought, but the roots remain. The Shinkansen awaited, ready to carry her back to St. Mary Mead, where new puzzles undoubtedly awaited, as timeless as the seasons.